Now let's see how do we insert an element in between the nodes in singly linked list. So inserting the node could be because of various use cases. So let's say someone tells you that search for an element 5, search for the node which is having data as 5 and insert a node after that particular data. Or for that matter, someone asks you that insert a node after third node in the linked list. So in this case, it might happen that you'll have to insert an element in between the nodes in linked list. So let's take the first scenario. Let's say I have a problem statement that I have to search for node with data as 5 and I have to insert a node with data as 10 after that particular node. So let's say I have to do this. So what are the operations we need to perform? So the very first thing that we need to do is we have to search for that particular node which is having data as 5, and then we have to insert the element or insert the new node after that particular node, let's say after 5. Okay, so how will we search? So we will start from the very first node, and we know that head points to the first node. So we have head that is pointing to first node. We will have a temp node, and that temp node will help us going through these nodes and help us getting to the right node. So let's say the temp node initially points to the first node. And we know that node has two fields. One is data, another is next. So next contains a reference to the next node, and data is the one which is obviously carrying the data. So here we will be checking that if the data of this particular node is equal to the data that we are looking for. So here we check if that is the case. No, that's not the case. So now the temp node goes to this particular node. So here we do the same thing. We check if the data of temp node and this particular data, let's say this is num, is same or not, which is the case. So here both of them are 5. So now my temp node is pointing to this particular element. So what we have to do now, we have to insert 10 after this particular element. So we create a new node, let's say here. So in order for this particular node to be in between these two elements, what we have to do? We have to change the next of this particular node to point to this node, and we have to change the next of this node to point to this particular node. So this is the operation that we have to perform. We are changing the next of 5 and we are changing the next of this particular new node that we created. So this is what we have to do in order to insert an element between the nodes in linked list. So let's quickly see what are the operations. How do we write code for these operations? So we initially have head pointing to here. So first thing is we have to search for the element. So what we do is we create a new temp node and we initialize this with head, which means even the temp node is pointing to the first element of the list. And we run a loop that while temp node dot data is not equal to num, let's say num is having value 5, then we keep on updating the temp node to the next element. So temp node is equivalent to, let's cut this, temp node dot next. Okay, so let's see, are we getting the right node using this? So initially temp node is here. Okay, checking whether the data is same as num. No. So now temp node is equal to temp node dot next. What is the next of temp node? This particular node. So now temp node will starting to point here. So now is the data same? Is the temp node dot data is equivalent to num? So this condition becomes false and we come out of this particular loop. So we have got the node after which we have to place the element. Now what we have to do? We have to update the links. So if I have the node here, let's say I've created the node, I have to update link of this and I have to update next of this, both of them. So I can either do this first and this second, or I can first update next of this and then this. So does that make any difference? Let's try to see that. So let's say I update next of this particular node first. So let's say I do something like temp node dot next is equal to new node. Let's say the newly created node is new node. And how do we create a new node? We have seen that earlier. We do create an object of node. We use the constructor So this will create a new node. This particular node will be created somewhere in the memory here, but we are trying to put this after this particular node. So if we do this temp node dot next equal to new node, so there will be a link created between these two. So the next of this particular node will start pointing to this pointer, start pointing to this particular node. But now we have to update next of this also. So we have to update next of 10 to point to 6. But the problem is this link does not exist anymore. We don't have any reference to this particular node. How will I do that? So when you are writing code, make sure you're checking that whether you are not losing reference to any node or not. So this particular thing will be invalid. So we can't do this particular operation. It's going to give us errors. So what we will do is we will first update the next of newly created node. So we will do new node dot next is equal to temp node dot next. So what is the right now before we have done this operation? So initially the next of this is still this, we haven't done this operation. So initially the next of this was 6 only. So we are trying to put the next of new node to the temp node dot next. What is the next of temp node? 6. So now the next of this particular node will start pointing to this particular node. So we have created this link. Now we have to update this particular next. So how do we do that? We do temp node dot next is equivalent to new node. So now this particular link gets created, right? So we have inserted 10 in between 5 and 6. Now let's go and see and write the code for this, and we also see this in a few scenarios that we should take care of. So we have our main. So let's say we have already done list dot inserted beginning, inserted end, and 2 times inserted end with value 2 and 3. So how my list will look? It will look something like this. We have 1, 2 and 3. Okay. Now what we have to do is, let's say we have to create a new node 4 and we have to put this after 2 or in between 2 and 3. So let's write the code for this. First let's write for searching this particular node. So let's say for inserting at mid, let's say I'm writing mid, though it's not mid exactly, still let's say I write it insert at mid, or let's say I simply write this as insert. So here let's say we are inserting the element. So we will be passing 2 parameters here. Number will be data of the node after which we are doing the insertion, and number 2 will be data of the new node that we are creating. Obviously we will get error here because we haven't defined insert yet. So let's say I define the insert method. So we have void insert int num comma int data. So this num and data we are getting from the main method. So let's do the operation. The very first operation, if you remember, was to find the right node. So we will create temp node for this. The temp node will start pointing to the first node. Now I will run a loop to find the right node. While temp node not equal to num, temp node is equivalent to temp node dot next. Okay, so I'm getting an error here because we haven't put temp node dot data. So we have done this particular thing. This looks good. We will search for the data and things will happen. But there could be a scenario that particular data does not exist. So let's say I somehow pass here, in place of num, I let's say pass 5. So what will happen? It will keep on searching. Then there will be a situation that 5 is not there, and we are continuously updating temp node to point to this next element. So what will happen? That eventually temp node will have value as null. So here when we will do temp node dot data for null, we will obviously get null pointer exception. So for saving ourselves from that particular thing, what we will do is we will check that temp node should not be equal to null. So if temp node is null, then this particular loop will get broken. So after this, let's say we get our temp node. What we will do? We will create a new node. So let's say the new node is, and we pass the data. Fine, new node gets created. Now we have to update the links. So we saw the updation of the links. Let's write it. So we will first update next of new node. New node dot next is equivalent to temp node dot next, right? And temp node dot next is equivalent to new node. So this is how the links will get updated. So let's verify this is right or wrong. So till now we have been dry run the code. We dry run the code to see it's right or wrong. Let's now print the elements of the linked list. So let's see how do we print elements of a linked list. So for printing the elements, let's say I'm creating a new method, void print list. So it won't accept any parameter. So we will create a temp node for going through the elements of the list, and obviously it will initially point to head, and we will keep on iterating through the list until the node becomes empty. And if it is not empty, we will simply print the data of the node. First, let's run this program to see how things become. I'm calling print list 2 times, one before the insertion and another after the insertion. So let's see what is the output that we are getting. Okay, so in this case, first we are getting 1, 2, 3, and then we are getting 1, 2, 4 and 3. So now let's run this program to see what is the output we are getting. So as you can see that we are first getting 1, 2 and 3. This is for the first list, and then we are getting 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 4 and 3. So as you can see, we are getting the elements from the first list as 1, 2 and 3, and after insertion we are getting the elements as 1, 2, 4 and 3, which means that the code is working fine. But again, when we are writing this code, here we are assuming that there are 2 nodes and we will be inserting between the nodes. Obviously, when we are doing the insertion, we have to take care that there might be a situation where we are searching the node, as we have seen here. When we are searching the node, there is no such node present and we are getting temp node as null. So we obviously have to check those scenarios. So this was about inserting node in between the 2 lists. Let's quickly dry run this particular thing, though we have verified that it's working. So let's say we have 1, 2, and let's say we have 3, and we have to insert 4 in between. So first we are searching for the right node. So we have initially temp node pointing to the first node. Then we run a loop. We check that temp node not equal to null, which is true. Temp node dot data not equal to num for here, which is true. So now what happens? Temp node is equivalent to temp node dot next. So it goes to the next node. So here we again check if temp node not equal to null, which is true. Temp node dot data not equal to num. So this condition becomes false because the data is equivalent to num. So now my temp node is pointing to this particular node. Now we have to do the insertion. Before that, we create a new node. This new node gets created somewhere in the memory, right? So we are updating new node dot next equal to temp node dot next. So the next of temp node right now is this particular node. So this will have the next of new node, and temp node dot next equal to new node. So now this will be my new next. So my updated list will be 1, 2, 4 and 3. So that was about insertion in linked list. If you are very much clear with the concepts, if you are very much clear that how links are changing in linked list, it becomes really easy for you to understand the things in linked list and write code for that.